recently the cryptocurrency values have dropped a lot. Do you have any words of advice for people who are interested in considering whether or not they should invest in cryptocurrency or sell it? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think with regards to the market backdrop, right? Like we think I'm not supposed to give like advice to people, but maybe I'll just like give some context and you can make your own decision. But we actually think that the recent bear markets are warranted. You've seen just an increasing delta between how much prices have gone up and how utility and development's actually caught up with it, right? A lot of it is just like less sophisticated retail money coming into the space and not appreciating the fact that engineering is hard, engineering is really tough, and it takes time, right? And so you have people taking profits incrementally, and you have that sentiment of like, oh, it's actually going to take some time to build out middleware. It's going to take some time for user adoption. Engineering is hard. You couple that with a small market that's very thinly traded. Like crypto overall is a $200 billion market, right? To level set, and it's like what, like a fifth, like the market. Fifth of like Apple's market cap. It's tiny. It's uninvestable from the perspective of these large funds. And so you pair that bearish sentiment with the fact that a small order can move markets here, and you have the makings of a bear market. And so we think ultimately, if you want to be in crypto, you have to be in it for the long term. Granted, that's kind of a bias to you because we're longer term investors, and there are day traders that will say you can make money short term, and you can definitely do that too. But that's kind of a hard skill set to sort of bring to the table. But yeah, I think you just have to, time and time again, like you get rewarded for having strong hands. Like if you see Bitcoin as a proxy, it's been around for 10 years. You've seen crashes, I think in 2012 and 2014. But the narrative has changed. And every single time, I think back in 2012 and 2014, the narrative was like, oh, crypto's gonna die. Like this thing is gonna go to zero. Versus now, the narrative is a little different. It's a little different because now it's less of so is crypto going to die or go to zero. It's more like, hey, crypto's going to be around, but how big is it going to be? Is it going to be big or is it going to be small? But people I think have agreed that it's kind of here to stay. And it's also all relative, right? Like is crypto down 70 to 80% from year-to-date highs, or is it up like 2,700% from 2017? So even at current prices. So like cycles are normal, right? Hype cycles are normal in this frontier. Like you get paid to take risks, and that's how crypto works, right? 3 steps forward, 2 steps back.
Okay, great. Now we'll open it up for questions. Any questions in the audience? Victoria?
So, like outside from the practice of, sorry, I want to see you. So outside from the practice of investing, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on some of the factors of like decentralization and autonomy that certain crypto units such as Bitcoin has, and the kind of impact that you think that might have on our greater future for our greater financial system.
Yeah, sure. So I think you have there's a lot of guys out there that think everything should be decentralized. That's totally like not practical. I think there's a spectrum, right?
Yeah.
There are certain institutions that's super critical for it to be trustless. That's super critical for it to have like to use blockchain strengths of decentralization and security of multiple points of failure. And then there are some things where it's okay to have a centralized party running it because it just offers a better trade-off from like a user experience perspective. So I think the answer to your question isn't very straightforward, right? I think it depends on like what exactly you're looking at. Even within sectors, like which subsectors you're looking at, there's always going to be a trade-off, which is why you also have a lot of new blockchains coming out. I think, for example, like when you hear about like EOS has like thousands of transactions per second TPS versus Bitcoin only does like 7. That is a conscious decision on their part, right? They're sacrificing some degree of decentralization to get that throughput up, and that might be good for certain use cases, like business-to-business services, but something where you need like sovereign grade level protection, like Bitcoin, like you need to store money, and like you need even governments to not be able to touch that. That requires like pure decentralization, or is it something else? Another use case, you have like a set of trade-offs that can be optimized differently. So yeah, it depends on the use case. It also, I think part of like one of the other effects that it'll have is blockchain isn't necessarily meant to just completely disrupt or displace like Web 2.0 incumbents. It's also just a way to like make sure that these value-added intermediaries continue to add value, and they're just not like sitting on a set of proprietary data collecting economic rents, right? So if like for example, I don't think an Uber, like a decentralized Uber needs to exist, but if there were like a decentralized Uber project, maybe that puts pressure on like centralized Uber to offer a better service. So it's a way to incentivize innovation in kind of the Web 2.0 stack as well.
Thank you.
Fatima, did you have a question?
So what would you say to someone who is very new to the crypto space? How should they start to learn about the differences between the different cryptocurrencies? Suppose they like get a Coinbase account and want to like invest a little bit. Like what is the like new?
So I'll give you two things, right? Like the first thing I'll say is like just never FOMO into doing like deals or investments. I think you have to invest a lot into kind of your knowledge base and do the work, like learning about the asset class before you do something like outside of just buying top 2 assets on Coinbase. Which kind of, I guess, leads me to my second piece of advice here, which is how to think about building that esoteric like knowledge base, right? I think you just have to go in with a mindset that it's going to be a time commitment, and that's, you can't go around looking for a silver bullet. A lot of people come to the space and they look for that silver bullet, right? Whether that's finding that one resource that'll arm them with the single get-rich-quick strategy, or just dumping all their eggs into like a single like shitcoin in the hopes that it'll moon. But typically, the answer is like almost never to fire like one silver bullet. It's always to fire like a bunch of lead bullets to see what sticks. There's no good place to start. There's no sort of one primer in the space that you can look at and just get super smart. You just have to pick a spot, start reading. It'll open like a lot of rabbit holes that you have to just spend time digging through. And yeah, at the end of the day, it's like kind of how much do you want to learn about it. You have to dedicate time, right? Dedicate some time to reading, dedicate some time to like finding people who can teach you, and then dedicate some time to just think and reflect and form your own perspective on the space. Yeah, ultimately there's never a free lunch. Like, you get paid to take risks, you get paid to do work.
Thank you so much, George.